Rain lashes the stone sphinxes guarding Blenheim Palace's west terrace. Their faces carved in lead to mirror Gladys Deacon's once flawless features now stare weathered and hollow toward the Oxfordshire hills. Step inside the great hall. The air still holds something faint and sour, decades of spaniel accidents, soaked deep into Aubusson carpets, worth more than most homes. Above the portico, a single light illuminates 6 enormous blue-green eyes painted across the ceiling. Gladys's eyes. They watch the empty corridors below, perhaps waiting for a husband who abandoned her, or for the woman herself, the one who slipped into her own private darkness long before her final breath. This is what's left when ambition gets everything at once, then chokes on it. A palace that should sing of victory instead whispers warnings. If that chill just found your spine, hit that like button now. Subscribe if you haven't. Stories this strange, this true, don't surface often. And they need witnesses. The Gilded Age printed fortunes faster than society could decide who deserved a seat at the table. Between 1870 and 1900, America minted more millionaires than the previous century combined. Old money Europe watched with equal parts fascination and disgust as nouveau riche Americans arrived on steamships' checkbooks, ready hunting for titles and legitimacy. Thomas Walsh, an Irish immigrant scraping Colorado dirt in the San Juan Mountains, struck gold in 1896 at the Camp Bird Mine. Literal gold. Veins of it plus silver pouring out wealth, estimated at $5 million, then roughly $180 million in today's money. The mine produced over $20 million worth of ore during its peak years. Walsh didn't just get rich, he got Gilded Age rich. He relocated the family to Washington, D.C., purchased land at 2020 Massachusetts Avenue, and built an estate called Friendship with manicured lawns, marble fountains, and a ballroom designed to rival European palaces. His daughter Evalyn grew up in rooms draped in velvet air thick with the scent of conservatory roses. She learned to ride in custom-made saddles, hosted tea parties where senators' daughters whispered about her jewelry, and by age 12, understood that her father's fortune made her untouchable. Across the Atlantic, Edward Parker Deacon turned Boston textiles into Parisian high society. His fabrics draped the shoulders of European royalty silks, from lion velvets from Genoa, all filtered through his warehouses and marked up for the beau monde. His daughter Gladys grew up beneath crystal chandeliers at the Hotel Splendid in Cannes, where winter society gathered like migrating birds. She was tutored in 7 languages by governesses who corrected her posture with wooden rods. Those blue-green eyes, artists couldn't stop sketching them. Auguste Rodin called them the most beautiful in the world and sculpted her profile multiple times. Giovanni Boldini painted her in pastels. She collected admirers the way other girls collected dolls, understanding early that beauty was currency and hers was minted in rare denominations. Meanwhile, the Marlborough dynasty traced its bloodline back to John Churchill, 1st Duke Victor, at Blenheim in 1704 during the War of Spanish Succession. Queen Anne had gifted him the land and funded the palace's construction, a monument to military glory that cost £300, zero equivalent to billions today. But by the late 19th century, that glory had faded into expensive maintenance. Charles Spencer Churchill, the 9th Duke, inherited 187 rooms, 20 acres and debts that compounded annually. English primogeniture laws meant he couldn't sell the estate or divide it. He desperately needed American cash to prevent his palace's ceilings from literally crumbling onto priceless Renaissance paintings. Consuelo Vanderbilt provided the first injection in 1895. Her mother Alva forced the marriage despite Consuelo's tears, delivering a dowry of $2.5 million in railroad stock. Gladys would chase the second injection decades later believing she could succeed where Consuelo had merely survived. Then there's Barbara Hutton. Born November 14, 1912 in New York City, granddaughter of Frank Winfield Woolworth, whose five-and-dime empire had transformed pocket change into a $65 million fortune, over $2 billion adjusted for inflation. Woolworth understood something fundamental about American capitalism: volume beats margin. Sell cheap, sell everywhere. Sell constantly. By 1912, he operated over 600 stores nationwide. When his wife, Jenny, passed in 1924, Barbara inherited $26 million, outright nearly $500 million today at age 12. Add in trusts that ballooned to $42 million by her 21st birthday in 1933. The newspapers called her the richest girl in the world, and they weren't exaggerating by much. Her father, Franklin Laws Hutton Co., founded E.F. Hutton and Company, and had the foresight to sell short before the 1929 crash, while others jumped from Wall Street ledges. While breadlines stretched around corners, Barbara's fortune actually grew. Dorothy Arnold's world smelled different imported perfume and polished mahogany. Her father, Francis R. Arnold, ran F. Arnold and Company, importing luxuries elegant enough to supply Supreme Court justices through family connections. Her mother's brother had married Justice Rufus W. Peckham, giving the family access to circles that money alone couldn't buy. Their mansion at 108 East 79th Street carried a social register listing as solid as the Mayflower ancestry they claimed. Dorothy attended Bryn Mawr College, where she studied literature and developed dreams bigger than her father's import business. She wanted to write serious fiction published in real magazines, her name on spines in bookstore windows. But every manuscript came back with polite rejections. Her family's connections couldn't buy literary talent or editorial approval. That friction between what money could purchase and what it couldn't would define her final days. None of this happened by accident. These patriarchs were ruthless in boardrooms, brilliant with timing. They built dynasties on extraction mines that scarred mountains, retail chains that undercut local shops, international trade that exploited colonial labor networks. Then they dressed it all up in European aristocratic theater. The air in their homes carried cigar smoke from late-night deals, where fortunes changed hands on handshakes. Rolls-Royce silver ghosts idled outside on cobblestone drives. Chauffeurs in crisp livery stood under gas lamps waiting. These men understood that wealth alone wasn't enough. It needed performance spectacle, the illusion of old blood, even when the money still smelled of fresh earth and factory smoke. Here's the thing about darkness: it never announces itself. It seeps in through foundation cracks you didn't know existed. And when you're this wealthy, those cracks get plastered over painted gold, ignored until the whole structure starts to tilt. For Gladys, childhood held the first fracture February 1892. Her father discovered her mother's affair with Emilia Beale at the Hotel Splendid. What happened next shattered the facade of respectability the Deacons had carefully maintained. 3 shots from a revolver echoed through the suite. Beale collapsed behind a sofa, bleeding out onto Persian rugs, while Gladys's mother screamed. Edward stood there, smoking gun in hand, as hotel staff rushed in. He claimed temporary insanity brought on by the betrayal. His wealth bought him the best lawyers France could offer. He served only months for manslaughter, a sentence so light it scandalized even the permissive Parisian courts, but the trauma lodged in Gladys like shrapnel. She was 11 years old enough to understand what her father had done, young enough to internalize that violence as somehow normal, even justified. Her father spiraled afterward. Paranoia consumed him. He saw conspiracies everywhere, accused servants of poisoning his food, barricaded himself in hotel rooms. By 1899, the family had him committed to McLean Hospital outside Boston, the same institution that would later house Sylvia Plath and other broken minds. He remained there until his passing in 1901, raving about betrayals, real and imagined. His own mother had shown similar mental instability years earlier, screaming fits, periods of catatonia, claims that relatives were plotting against her. That's the pattern, isn't it? Hereditary shadows masked by privilege, passed quietly through bloodlines like recessive genes waiting for the right conditions to express themselves. Evalyn Walsh laughed at legends when Pierre Cartier sold her the Hope diamond in 1911 for $180, about $5.5 million today. That 45.52 carat blue stone had rolled through history like a cursed marble. King Louis XIV purchased it in 1668. Marie Antoinette reportedly wore it before her date with the guillotine. Henry Philip Hope acquired it in the 1830s. His family's banking empire collapsed within decades. Every owner seemed to suffer suicides, bankruptcies, sudden deaths. Evalyn thought it was all superstitious nonsense. She let her Great Dane wear it like a collar at garden parties, showed it off at baseball games, the blue stone catching sunlight while she cheered for the Senators. She believed money made her invincible. But 1919 brought the first real crack. 9-year-old Vincent, playing near the gates of Friendship, struck by a vehicle on Massachusetts Avenue. The driver didn't see him dart out. Gone in an instant. Evalyn heard the screams from inside the house. She ran out to find her son's small body on the pavement, his shoes she'd bought them just that week, scuffed and twisted at an angle that made her knees buckle. Grief drove her to morphine within months. The family physician prescribed it liberally, as doctors did then, for wealthy patients. Ned's drinking deepened. He'd always enjoyed bourbon, but now bottles disappeared nightly. The diamond hung from her neck, cool against skin that seemed to thin with each passing year, a weight she couldn't remove even when she wanted to. Barbara's shadow arrived early, and it arrived violent. 1917, age 5, she discovered her mother Edna's body in their home. The official story called it self-inflicted harm, linked to Franklin's very public affairs with other women. But 5-year-old Barbara didn't understand affairs or depression. She understood that Mama wouldn't wake up, that men in dark coats took the body away, that her father didn't cry at the funeral. That image never faded, no matter how many therapists her trust fund later hired. Nannies replaced parents, efficient women who kept her fed, clean, educated, but never held her when nightmares came. Her grandmother's dementia and grandfather's decline left emotional rooms empty, even in 60-room mansions, with servants in every hallway. She learned young that money couldn't buy the one thing she needed: someone who stayed. Dorothy's rebellion brewed quietly, the way pressure builds in closed systems. She wanted to write not society columns or poetry for ladies' magazines, but serious fiction that examined real human darkness. Manuscripts came back rejected from the Atlantic Monthly, Harper's, every publication that mattered. Her family mocked what they called her literary pretensions. Why did she need to work? Why embarrass them? By chasing something so common as authorship, her father forbade Greenwich Village bohemia, those dirty coffee shops where writers gathered, that world of loose morals and looser women. But secret letters kept arriving from George C. Griscom Jr. in Boston. He was studying abroad, sending her notes about art and philosophy, the kind of intellectual connection her family's parlor conversations never offered. December 12, 1910, she stepped out of 108 East 79th Street, wearing her blue suit, black velvet hat trimmed with silk roses, black fox muff, keeping her hands warm against the winter cold. She carried $25 to $30 in cash, enough for a week of modest living, not enough for anything permanent. She bought chocolates at Park and Tilford on Fifth Avenue, the kind her mother liked. Then she walked to Brentano's bookstore and purchased Engaged Girl Sketches, a popular book of the season. A friend spotted her around 2 p.m. near the store, said she looked distracted but normal. Then Dorothy Arnold dissolved into Fifth Avenue crowds like ink in water and never surfaced again. The turning point is never just one event. It's the moment when hubris collides with inheritance, when the mechanisms that built empires turn inward and start grinding up their own. The same ambition that built palaces now amplified what lurked within mental illness running through generations like underground rivers. Children lost violently to accidents that money should have prevented, love treated as transaction in ledgers, where affection had market value. Palaces became cages. Blenheim overrun by dogs destroying carpets, Consuelo had imported from Paris. Friendship echoing with phantom sounds, Evalyn swore she heard Vincent calling for her at night, his voice drifting through hallways where he'd never walk again. Woolworth trusts bleeding dry through divorce settlements and shopping sprees that somehow never filled the hole. The Arnold mansion frozen in permanent silence, Dorothy's room preserved like a shrine, her half-finished manuscript still on the desk. Gladys's attempt to perfect her appearance in 1903, an injection of paraffin wax meant to refine her nose, went catastrophically wrong. The doctor promised a subtle improvement, a slight lift that would make those blue-green eyes even more striking. Instead, the wax migrated beneath her skin over the following years, shifting with temperature changes and gravity warping cheeks and jaw into something that horrified even Rotting. He stopped sculpting her. Boldini refused to paint her again. Society whispered behind gloved hands. Yet she pressed forward with a determination that bordered on delusion. Mistress at Blenheim, by 1912 carrying on openly with the Duke, while Consuelo still lived there. Duchess, in 1921, after Consuelo finally secured her divorce. Marriage soured within months. The Duke realized Gladys brought no American fortune. Her father's estate had been frittered away on lawyers and hospital bills. What she brought instead were neuroses and those dogs. Spaniels, dozens of them, breeding unchecked in the palace's east wing. They tore through gilt furniture that dated to Queen Anne's reign, urinated on paintings, where thousands howled through the night keeping servants awake. Gladys slept with a revolver beside the bed, convinced intruders were coming. She accused the Duke of plotting with relatives to have her committed just like her father had been. By 1933, he'd had enough. Evicted her legally changed, the Locks had her belongings packed into trunks and sent to a farm property the family owned. He passed the following year reportedly relieved to have died free of her. Alone at Chalcombe Farm in Oxfordshire, living under the name Mrs. Spencer, she wore boiler suits and patched Wellington boots like a rural eccentric. Locals whispered she was a witch, this strange woman with the ruined face who screamed at trespassers and kept to herself. Children threw stones at her windows on dares, then ran when she appeared with that shotgun, yelling in languages they didn't understand. Confrontations escalated. Police were called multiple times. By 1962, mounting delusions, she claimed the Duke was still alive, that government agents were stealing her mail, that her dogs could speak, forced family members to petition for her commitment to St. Andrew's Hospital in Northampton. She spent 15 years in the psycho-geriatric ward, a building that smelled of disinfectant and urine, where elderly patients wandered hallways in bathrobes, muttering to themselves. Gladys insisted to the end Gladys Deacon never existed. "I don't know who you're talking about." She denied her own identity, perhaps the only escape left. Staff noted she would stare at walls for hours, sometimes laughing at private jokes, sometimes weeping silently. She left this world at 96 in 1977, her body cremated, ashes scattered without ceremony. Evalyn pawned the Hope diamond during the Depression. Even vast fortunes felt the pinch when markets collapsed. She redeemed it months later, couldn't bear to part with it permanently despite everything. But losses kept mounting. Her daughter Evalyn Jr. succumbed to an overdose of sleeping pills at 25 in 1946. Whether accidental or intentional, the coroner couldn't definitively say. Ned, divorced from Evalyn since 1932, had been declared mentally unfit in 1933, his alcoholism and paranoia finally convincing doctors he needed institutional care. He spent his final years in an asylum raving about conspiracies until passing in 1941. Evalyn herself succumbed to pneumonia in 1947 at 60. Her lungs finally giving out after years of morphine had weakened everything. The diamond went to Harry Winston, who donated it to the Smithsonian in 1958, where it still rotates under glass, drawing millions of tourists who press their faces close and whisper about curses. Barbara's fortune hemorrhaged through extravagance that bordered on compulsive. The Sidi Hosni Palace in Tangier, purchased and renovated at enormous cost, only to be abandoned after a few seasons. Sumiyoshi Estate in Mexico, same pattern. Jewels like the Vladimir tiara, emeralds the size of walnuts, pearl necklaces that Marie Antoinette had owned, bought, worn, once stored in vaults. 7 husbands exploited her wealth systematically, understanding she would pay any price to feel loved. Alexis M. Divani walked away with $2 million after 2 years. Kurt Reventlow took $1.5 million plus custody of their son. Each marriage followed the same arc: passion, exploitation, divorce, settlement. Her son Lance, born 1936, grew up watching his mother's decline. By 1972, he was piloting small planes, ignoring weather warnings, pushing limits the way his mother pushed her credit with jewelers. That May he flew into the Colorado Rockies despite forecasts of severe turbulence. The plane crashed in remote terrain. Search teams took days to find the wreckage. Barbara paid for everything: the search, the recovery, the funeral, but money couldn't bring him back or undo the years of emotional distance between them. Eating disorders tightened their grip. Anorexia turned her body skeletal. Barbiturate dependency meant she needed pills to sleep, pills to wake, pills to function. A devastating hip injury left her bedridden in a Beverly Hills hotel suite, the curtains drawn against California sunroom service trays piling up untouched. Heart failure claimed her May 11, 1979 at 66. News reports claimed she died with only $3,500 remaining. The exact figure is contested. Her estate was more complex than that, but her isolation was absolute. No crowds at the funeral, no tearful eulogies, just lawyers and a few distant relatives dividing what was left. Dorothy never came home. Her family delayed reporting her absence for 6 weeks. Scandal avoidance took priority over finding their daughter. When Francis Arnold finally contacted police, he painted a picture of a moody, unstable girl prone to literary fits. He spent $100 on Pinkerton Detectives reward psychics, anyone who claimed to have information. Theories circulated: despair over literary rejection and forbidden love drove her to end things in the Hudson River. Or she'd eloped with Griscom, who vehemently denied it. Or foul play: white slavery rings operated in New York. Wealthy girls sometimes disappeared. Nothing proven, nothing found. Her room remained untouched for years, half-finished manuscript still on the writing desk, diary entries mentioning Griscom and her frustration with her family's lack of support. Frances passed in 1922, believing she'd taken her own life out of shame. Mary Martha followed in 1928, still watching the front door every afternoon, still hoping her daughter would walk through with some explanation that made it all make sense. The palace's stand. Blenheim's portico eyes still gaze downward, repainted during restorations in the 1950s, but retaining Gladys's haunting proportions. Sphinxes guard terraces, where tourists now walk, cameras clicking. The spaniel stains are long scrubbed away, but memory lingers in restoration archives. Workers who cleaned those rooms in the 1930s reported the smell never fully disappeared. The Hope Diamond rotates under Smithsonian lights, 45 carats of deep blue drawing, 6 million visitors annually who press against glass barriers and whisper about curses while security guards stand impassive, having heard every theory 1,000 times. Scientists have analyzed it, found it's a type IB diamond, extraordinarily rare, containing trace amounts of boron that give it that blue color. Nothing supernatural, just geology. But the stories persist because humans need explanations for why the wealthy suffer just like everyone else. Woolworth stores vanished decades ago, outlasted by the very discount model Frank pioneered Walmart Target dollar stores that sold even cheaper. But Barbara's name echoes in tabloid margins and documentary footnotes as the poor little rich girl, a cautionary tale about money's inability to purchase happiness or stability or love that stays. The Arnold Mansion at 108 East 79th Street sold long ago, subdivided into luxury apartments, where residents have no idea a girl once vanished from their building into New York City crowds. No plaque marks the perfume heiress who stepped out for chocolates and never returned. Her case remains officially unsolved, occasionally referenced when new disappearances make headlines, but cold now for over a century. Power bought silence first. Then it amplified screams. Dynasties built on gold, extracted from mountains, retail chains that undercut small shops, imported scents from colonial enterprises, aristocratic titles, purchased with American railroads, each one crumbled under the weight of blood, carrying identical fractures. Mental illness, lost heirs, isolation behind velvet curtains. The ambition that raised them became the very mechanism of their undoing, transforming thrones into tombs, ballrooms, into psychiatric wards, jewelry, into museum exhibits where strangers gawk. What remains when the last guest departs, when the final light dies in the portico, when the eyes painted on the ceiling watch nothing but dust settling in empty halls? The answer is simpler and more terrible than any curse. Everything material persists: the buildings, the jewels, the bank accounts in various states, but the people who inhabited them disappear as completely as Dorothy Arnold on Fifth Avenue. What remains is the reminder that no amount of wealth protects against the darkness we carry in our own blood, the grief that finds us regardless of postal codes, the madness that doesn't check trust fund balances before deciding who it claims. Their names are footnotes now, their fortunes dispersed or displayed behind glass.
But the pattern they revealed remains: stock, power, and wealth don't corrupt so much as they amplify. Whatever light or darkness already exists within gets magnified until it consumes everything else. In the end, the palaces stand empty, the eyes watch no one, and the rain keeps falling on stone sphinxes that will outlast every human story carved into their faces.